Slitheen, they fart. I like them.
I think from our era, possibly the Haemovores, because they just looked so good. They really looked like they'd come from the sea and they were ancient and they were covered in barnacles, and also they all had characters as well. They were all dressed in different historical costumes. I thought they were really effective monsters. And then in general, well, I think the Weeping Angels are amazing. I mean, they're just terrifying, aren't they? How about you guys?
I love, from the classic series, the work that was done by a sculptor called John Friedlander in most of Pertwee's era. He was just a very clever man coming up with simple but effective designs, and his Sea Devil, I brought one of the Sea Devils that he built back in 1972 along. It's outside if you want to have a look. And the fact that they've just been able to bring the Sea Devils back into the series 50 years later, and it's exactly the same design that John came up with, I think is a testament to just how good he was, that you can just take something 50 years old and plonk it back on screen, it'll be accepted. And in terms of the stuff that we worked on, it's a controversial one, but I think Candyman was an extraordinary monster. Just to have the guts to go with, we are going to put something that absurd on screen, and then the actor plays it so sinister that you think, well, it looks like a giant sweetie monster, but I really wouldn't want to be locked in a room with him.
Who was the actor?
It was David John Pope, and he plays it with this horrible voice, and it's an extraordinary juxtaposition of ridiculously comedic and terribly sinister, and it works very well.
Miranda?
Sylvester McCoy was my doctor.
Yeah.
And I meant time-wise, I think I was... One of my fears is people with animal heads. I can't stand it. And there's a Daphne du Maurier short story called The Blue Lenses. I don't know if anyone's ever read it, but it's absolutely horrifying. And the premise is, for various reasons, this woman sees people as the animal that they are, and in those episodes they had these pig men dressed as and they had pig heads, and I thought, I was alone in it until we did an episode of Doctor Who Confidential. They sort of filled the studio with children, and they had all these, pig men around who were kind of, oinking, and they had to get them all to leave. The children couldn't. There were accidents. They just couldn't cope with it. So even though I was about 20 years older than the kids were, I thought, okay, it's all right. They are scary then in that case. I was so frightened by the Cybermen that my mum stopped me watching it because it was terrifying, and it must have been, I think, maybe around Tomb of the Cybermen, or the bit where they all come out of the cling film, or it couldn't have been cling film in those days, but they were terrifying with the sort of more like stocking masks, and they had a voice and way like that, they spoke like that in those days, I think, and I just found them absolutely terrifying. But then I saved a fortune in therapy because, of course, I killed loads off with my catapult later.
I was never scared by the monsters in Doctor Who. I was fascinated by the monsters in Doctor Who. It's that business of, right, I want to build those or make those. I was more scared by, it's 1950s B-movie, sci-fi, Forbidden Planet, where you don't see the monster, you hear the monster, and you see the footsteps that the monster made. And that actually scared me to the point I had to leave the room, because in my head, this thing was horrible, and you never see it.
I was 20 when it started, and therefore I wasn't a sofa big enough for me to hide behind. Although I do remember very clearly watching the very first episode. I'll quickly tell you if you haven't heard it. I was a law student. I was living in a flat in Lancaster Gate. I'd been out during the day, came in, 3 fellow students watching as the opening credits came up, and I took my coat off and put it over the banister and leant on the banister to watch. the first episode ever of Doctor Who, and I was still there when it ended. I hadn't moved, and I was riveted. Now, when you look at that, you think, what, that old flickering image? But that was state of the art back then, and it was brilliant.